So in this question, we want to take a look at what you do if you want to calculate quartiles or percentiles for a set of data, but the data has already been grouped together in a frequency distribution table. So here's the question we're looking at. A business association rates hotels on a variety of factors, price, cleanliness, services, et cetera, to produce an overall score out of 100 for each hotel. For a major city, they found the following ratings. They found 7 hotels below 50, and then from 50 to 60, 11, 60 to 79 hotels, and then so on and so on and so on. Let's say we want to find the median and the interquartile range. So what we remember from the last part of the lesson was that the median, of course, is just the Q2 value, and to get the interquartile range, we're going to need to find our values of Q3 and our value of Q1 and subtract them. So basically we have to find our quartiles first, and then we can then we'll have everything that we need, and then we can find the quartile range, which is the last thing we need. So the way that we are going to approach this is actually, just before we do anything, I'm just going to number off these intervals that we have here so that they're a little easier to talk about. So we've got our data divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 separate intervals. Okay? And we know the range for each interval, and we know the number of hotels in each one of these intervals. The first thing that we're going to want to figure out is we're going to want to add a column to this table here, which is the cumulative number of hotels. And as we talked about before, when we're talking about a cumulative value, it's just we're starting at the top and we're going down, and we're accumulating all of the values in that second column there. So in the first row, we have a cumulative value of 7 hotels. When we get to the second row, we add in the 11 for a total of 18. And in the third row, we add in the 9 that appear in the third row to have a cumulative value of 27. And we just keep accumulating these numbers as we go down our rows. So 39, 8, and 3. This number here should be a 12. Okay? Because then it adds up to, oh, sorry, I said 8 and 3. I meant 47 and 50. Okay? I was worried about that 12 there. So our last value, or our last cumulative value, should be the same number as the total number of things that we have in our data points, the total number of data points that we have. So we have 50 data points, so that's where our cumulative value ends up. Now, we want to find our quartile values. So our first value that we're going to try to find here, let's say we're going after Q1. So Q1 is the value for which we have, which is greater than or equal to 1/4 of that data. So if there are 50 data points, our Q1 value has to be greater than or equal to 50 divided by 4, or 12.5 data points. Okay, so we want to figure out how far into this list of values we have to go until we have accumulated 12.5 values. Okay, because once we get to that point, we'll know that that is our Q1 value. So let's see, if we start up at the top, the first row, we have 7, which is not enough. But by the time we get to the end of the second row, we've accumulated 18. So we know that somewhere in this second interval from 50 to 60 is our value for Q1. Okay? Our next job is not at the beginning of that interval. It's not at the end of that interval. If it was at the beginning, we only have 7. At the end of that interval, we have 18, which is too many. It's somewhere in the middle of that interval. So our next job is to figure out how far into that interval this value of Q1 is going to be. So at the start of the interval, we have 7 values, right? To get up to 12.5, we need 5.5 more values. Okay? So those 5.5 additional values have to come out of this second interval. So we need 5.5 values, data values, from inside that second interval. Okay. So we need 5.5 intervals. How many of them, how many data points are actually in this second interval? Well, there's a total of 11 in this interval. So we need 5.5 out of the 11 data points that are in this second interval. Okay. Now, we want to take that fraction and we want to turn it into sort of a value in terms of the rating of the hotel. So the start of this interval that we're looking at, this second interval, it starts at 50. And the width of this interval, well, it has a width of 10 because it goes from 50 to 60. This is how we calculate our Q1 value. Okay, so this is the start of the interval. It starts at 50 and it goes to 60. Okay, this is the width of the interval. It starts at 50, goes to 60, it has a width of 10. And this in here is sort of the fraction of numbers out of that interval that we need to get up to that Q1 value. So then we just punch this into our calculator and we work out what it is. It works out to be, I believe it works out to be 55. So 55 is our Q1 value. Okay. I'll just put a red box around that so it stands out. Okay. So this is a little bit of a tricky calculation. So let's repeat it again for Q2. Okay, we'll do Q2. Let's see, we'll move this over here. We'll do Q2. Okay, so Q2 is our median. If we are looking for the value of Q2, we want the value that is greater than or equal to half of our data set. So for Q2, rather than taking a quarter of our data set, we're going to take half of our data set. So we want to find the 25th number in our data set. So again, we start up at the top and we look at how far into our data or how far down these rows we have to go to accumulate 25 values. So we have so at the first row we have 7, then we have 18. By the time we get to the end of the third interval here, we've got a total of 27. So Q2 is somewhere in that third interval. Okay. Now, at the start of that interval, we have 18. Okay. We need to get up to 25, so we need 7 more out of that interval. Okay. So our Q2 calculation, we need 7 out of how many are in that interval, that third interval? There are 9. So we need 7 out of the 9 values in that interval number 3. And then again, we need the width of the interval, and we need the value at the start of that interval, which is 60. So 60 plus 7 over 9 times 10 is going to give us our value for Q2, which gives us 67.8. So this is our Q2, or our median value. And we'll highlight this in green here. All right, let's find our value of Q3 doing the same process. So Q3, we need 3/4 of the way through the data set. So we need 3/4. So we need 3/4 times 50 is 37.5. So we want to go start up at the top and we want to accumulate 37.5 data points. So 7, 18, 27. Q3 has to be in this interval here because by the time we get to the end of it, we've got 39. So that's a little bit more than the 37. So at the start of that interval, we have how many data points? We've got 27. If we're going to get up to 37 and a half, we need 10 and a half more out of interval number 4. So 10 and a half out of how many are there in interval number 4 there? There are 12 values. It has a width of 10. Interval number 4 starts at 70. So our value for Q3 is going to be 70 plus 10.5 divided by 12 times 10. We work that out and we get, oh, I better double check that one on the calculator. Looks like I maybe did something wrong when I was working that out. 10.5 divided by 12 times 10 plus 70, 78.75. Is our value for Q3. Now, let's make sure we've actually answered this question here. So they were asking us for the median, which we have calculated, and they were asking us for the interquartile range. So our interquartile range is just going to be our Q3 value, 78.75, minus our Q1 value, 55, which is going to be 23.75. Okay. So the general formula that we're kind of using on these is that our value that we're trying to calculate, whether it's Q1, Q2, or Q3, is the start of whatever bin it's in, the number needed from that bin, divided by the number in the bin, say total number in that bin, times the width of the bin. Okay. And that's sort of a general sort of formula that you can use for any kinds of these questions. Okay. So the second part of this question asks us to find a percentile. Well, percentiles and quartiles are basically the same. So we can use this general formula here to figure out any percentile that we want as well. So let's take a look at the second part here of this question. To be highly recommended, a hotel must be in the 90th percentile. What score is needed? So again, we'll just tack on here our cumulative values here. So 7, 18, 27, 39, 47, and 50. If we want to have the 90th percentile, we want 90% of those 50 data points. So we want to accumulate 45 data values. Okay, so how far do we have to go to accumulate 45? Well, P90 is going to be in this interval right here, okay, because by the end of it, we've got 47 data points and we need 45 of them. So what's our P90 value going to be? Well, let's see, we need 45. At the start of that bin, we have 39. So to get up to 45, we need an additional 6 out of the 8 that are in that interval. The interval has a width of 10. Its starting value is 80. So our value for our 90th percentile is going to be, I think, 87.5. So If they score an 87.5 or above, they're in the 90th percentile. Otherwise, they are not in the 90th percentile.